Hello and welcome to another TLDR EU video. Russia and Ukraine have had an extremely difficult history, and even that's putting it mildly. In March 2014, Russia illegally annexed the autonomous region of Crimea, in what many saw as the largest land grab in Europe since the end of the Second World War. It would later emerge that Russian President Vladimir Putin had been prepared to use any military means necessary to, in his words, defend Crimea against the nationalists, including, worryingly, Russia's nuclear weapons arsenal. It's against this backdrop that recent events have taken place, where forces in Western Russia are seemingly being put on a war footing, leading many to question, are we about to see Russia enter an all-out war for Ukraine? It's very likely that this video, discussing war and violence, will be demonetized by YouTube. We knew that when we decided to make this video, but went ahead with it anyway, because we felt like it was an important topic to discuss. If you want to support our editorial independence and help us make content that we think is important rather than the most clickable, then be sure to back us on Patreon. In return for your donations, you get a whole bunch of perks and the knowledge that you're supporting our journalism. The link to that is down below. So what's actually happening in Russia and Crimea? Well, in recent days and weeks, multiple independent sources have publicly reported that the Russian military appears to be advancing to the eastern Ukraine-Russia border, as well as the wider region of Crimea. Jane's Information Group, an open-source military and national security intelligence firm, identified at least 14 Russian military units moving towards Ukraine since late March, including the likes of troops, tanks, infantry, artillery, and multiple rocket launchers. Jane's also identified the deployment of ballistic missile systems, missiles with reported ranges of up to 700 kilometers, and crucially, missiles that would have been prohibited under the Immediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty had the US not withdrawn in August 2019. The Russian defense minister, in televised remarks, subsequently confirmed the deployment of 2 army units and 3 airborne units to Russia's western border, stating that in response to NATO's military activities that threaten Russia, we took appropriate measures. This led the US to deploy 2 Navy destroyers to the Black Sea, in a show of force and in support for Ukraine, to which Russia hit back, warning them to stay away for their own good. The Kremlin hit back yet further, reaffirming that the movement of troops across its territory was an internal affair and didn't threaten anyone. Again, according to Jane's, current indicators suggest that it's unlikely the forces deployed to the border are an offensive posture. But the timing and sheer extent of force has caused many to worry. As things stand now, the movement of troops, personnel and equipment is the largest unannounced movement of troops since the invasion and annexation of Crimea. That annexation back in 2014 created a conflict zone in Ukraine, specifically within the Donbass region, which remains active to this day. Donbass consists of mainly Russian-speaking Ukrainians, some with Russian passports. Given the presence of those with Russian citizenship in the region, President Putin has stressed that Russia remains prepared to defend Russian citizens abroad if necessary. This notion of protection has exacerbated the conflict, which has been running on and off for about 7 years now. And since the start of the conflict, some 13,000 people have died. Russia's most recent move has, as can be expected, led to many calls for de-escalation. The current Secretary General of NATO called on Russia to end its unjustified, unexplained, and deeply concerning build-up of combat-ready troops on the Ukrainian border. Russia must end this military build-up in and around Ukraine, stop its provocations, and de-escalate immediately. The G7 on Monday reiterated NATO's concerns, again calling on Russia to cease its provocations and immediately de-escalate tensions. going on to remark that these large-scale troop movements, without prior notification, represent threatening and destabilizing activities. We reaffirm our unwavering support for the independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. In any case, a full-scale invasion would be a ballsy move from Russia, and not really in keeping with its past actions, where previously any movement to Ukraine was discreet. Ultimately, Russia's annexation of Crimea was not an all-guns-blazing, full-on military offensive, but a piecemeal infiltration of little green men, whose actions were at first distanced from Russia, before subsequently consolidating power and annexing the territory. For many, the move by Russia is simply a show of force to remind the West, and especially US President Joe Biden, that Russia can, if it wants, make their lives a misery. One EU diplomat remarked to France 24 that partly it's the usual tactics, turning up and down of the conflict to create stability, to show Russia is a key player. We cannot exclude the Biden presidency is part of the Russian calculus, that it is time for Moscow to show a bit of muscle. Something that comments from the Russian foreign minister seem to agree with, who highlighted that the Ukrainian military is fully aware of the dangers of a hot conflict. Going on to say, I very much hope that they will not be incited by politicians, who in turn will be incited by the West, led by the United States. Russian President Vladimir Putin said this not long ago, but this statement is relevant today, that those who try and start a new war in Donbass will destroy Ukraine. Ultimately, all of this led to action from the US president. In a call on Tuesday between Biden and Putin, Biden proposed meeting in a third country, similar to Trump's talks with Putin in Helsinki in 2018, as well as calling on Putin to de-escalate tensions with Ukraine. Biden was, according to the White House, clear that Ukraine would have the US's unwavering support when it comes to their sovereignty and territorial integrity. Whether these diplomatic moves are successful or not, this situation has simply heaped more pressure on Ukraine to join NATO formally. As things stand, Ukraine is not one of the 30 member states of the alliance, but rather a key partner, having ties to alliance members. In June 2020, Ukraine was one of the 6 countries to be designated as an enhanced opportunity partner. Said partners make particularly significant contributions to NATO operations and other alliance objectives, and in turn get NATO support where necessary. Getting full NATO membership would have wider ramifications than one might first guess. Firstly, full NATO membership would most likely lead to alliance forces being deployed along the Ukrainian border in light of the continuing Russian aggression. If Russia then mounted further attacks on Ukrainian sovereignty and began to annex further territory, Ukraine would most likely activate Article 5. Article 5, known as the Principle of Collective Defense, in essence states that an attack on one is an attack on all. Further moves by Russia would not simply be met by a response from Ukraine, but from all 30 NATO members. Most notably, the United States, the United Kingdom, and France, 3 of the 5 designated global nuclear powers. In spite of Ukraine not being a full member, NATO has, beyond making statements, made strategic moves to prepare for further offences. Since 2014, NATO's response force has tripled in size, and a dedicated 5,000-strong spearhead force has been developed, and deployments have been made throughout Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Romania. The US has, beyond the 2 Navy destroyers posted to the Black Sea, also supplied US Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine, and is more than prepared to send bigger and better weapons if needs be. Toward the beginning of April, when Russian forces began to build up, Ukraine's president actually called on NATO and key member states to press the accelerator with regards to the country's potential accession to NATO, specifically stating that the most urgent issue is the membership action plan to get Ukraine into NATO and quash the tension with Russia. But what do you think? What is Russia up to? And would Ukraine's membership of NATO quash or inflame tensions? And is there a peaceful way out of this? As always, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell icon to be notified every time we release a new video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.